Tenzin, it's an honor and it's a delight for me to be able to have this conversation with you. We've known each other for a decade or two. You've been living as a monk since 1998. You were ordained by His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a bhikshu, as a fully ordained monk in 2006. We've known each other almost since then. And I've appreciated the work you've done in different areas. And today I want to ask you to share with us some of what you've learned from your work in prisons. You've been working in prisons since 2000. I know that you've worked in youth prisons with youth between 14 and 23 years old. You've worked only in men's prisons, and that you have a 3-year course that you've given. I know that you in Germany, so you were born in East Germany, and the work that you do is in Germany and in German. So it's a very different prison system than the one that we're familiar with. And it is a system where a lot of attention is given to giving people who are incarcerated tools to find a path forward to a more productive way of life. That part is not universal, as I'm sure you know. That's something that Germany actually does a very good job at. But it means that you've had the opportunity to interact and work on ways to really be able to have a positive effect in the lives of the incarcerated people that you've worked with. I know you've worked with rapists, with pedophiles, with murderers, with bank robbers, with men who've committed serious crimes. And I would just like to ask you, what have you learned?
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Actually, I never talked in public about these things. But they are really precious to me. And I learned so much, and I'm still in contact with some ex-prisoners who didn't do a crime again, who really learned the lesson. So, and maybe I can start from where it all started in 2000. A prison director asked us, we asked actually the prison if they can give the permission that the youth works on a place of our Buddhist center, because the youth in the prison had to be educated, 14 to 18 or 23 years old. So they got the education, and sometimes they needed a place where they do some walling of painting of the walls and so on. And we wanted actually their free work. But then the director said, yeah, it's nice you get the free work from them, but what do you do for them? So, and then he asked us to do something for the prisoners. And then I asked him, what do you want us to do for them? What's the problem? And then he said, the problem is 90% of the prisoners go back to prison again. So, and I would like that you offer something that this quote of 80% decreases, to do something that fewer repeat their criminal action and don't have to go to prison anymore. So now I was thinking, oh, actually, this is a very good question, because Buddhism is all about mind, and mind precedes everything. So it all starts from the mind, your value system, the way how you think. Actually, your search for happiness starts how you act. And so I liked it very much. And then I was thinking, okay, what they need actually is to understand their mind. So actually what I started to teach in the youth prison is Lorik, the mind and its function. And I explained how attachment functions, how anger functions, what it does with the mind, with the speech, and with the body. And then actually that it's a delusional way to look for happiness following those mind poisons of attachment and aversion. So, and interestingly, these young people really followed the course until the end. And with some of them, I even had the individual training to overcome certain aggressive habits, or aggression habits, or compulsive stealing, for instance. So this is how it all started, because everybody, be it be it a criminal or not a criminal, everything starts from the mind. And there is so much Buddhism has to offer. So this is how it started. And then what I learned, of course, is between a prisoner and myself, there is no big difference. Actually, I said this also to the prisoner. There is no big difference because these prisoners, they have the same mind poisons as I have. I have attachment, they have attachment. I have aggression, they have aggression. I have anger, they have anger. I have hate, they have hate. So I have the same mental setup as them, but I grew up differently than them, and I had different conditions than them. So on other conditions, inner conditions and outer conditions, there can be a dynamic that criminal deeds unfold and get to a habit. Under conditions, although I have the same potential, it didn't develop. So that's why I can be lucky. I didn't become a criminal, although I was a little bit on the way when I was a youth. So I did also some stealing, including breaking into people's buildings and so on. So I know a little bit how this mind functions. But luckily, I stopped it at a point. And this was due to circumstances, and other people were not able to stop it, either because they had the wrong environment, they had the wrong people who encouraged them to continue, and other circumstances. So I cannot really look down on them, but I understand them. Oh, actually, they were not able to see the wrongs of their behavior and to stop it. Luckily, I was able, but so now I'm here to help those who want to stop this criminal behavior to stop it. So, and then what I learned is ways to communicate with them and to give them means to learn to regulate their emotions, which drove them compulsory to the criminal deeds, like compulsory stealing, thinking you can take what you want, or being unable to control your sexual desire and all those things. So, and then I offer them means to work with their thoughts, with their emotions, and also I question their value system. And what connects me too with the prisoner is just what we have in Buddhism is the understanding wherever there is a mind, this being wants to be happy and free from suffering. So now this criminal, and I understand it because I was myself as a as a youth, a little bit on a criminal path. It's just a way to search for happiness, but it's a diluted way. You won't find happiness by following criminal ways. You have far, far more problems. And even if you are successful, you have a lot of fears that it's coming out, that you are caught or put to prison. There's so many problems. And so I know it from own experience. So, and then I can relate to their experience, and I can build bridges for them to better understand. You are more happy and you have more freedom if you stop this criminal behavior. So, and then what I learned from them is, for instance, how to make Buddhist teachings, how to use them in a way which is secular and helps them on their way to regulate their emotions. And last course I gave, actually I gave 2 3-year courses, one together with a psychologist. Actually I gave 4 3-year courses. It's 4 3-year courses altogether, and 3 of them together with a psychologist. And in many of those courses are Muslims. And the Muslims, they come to me as a Buddhist monk. And sometimes the wards, they tease the Muslims. Why are you going to a Buddhist monk? I thought you are a Muslim. And they say, you don't understand. It's about mind training, but the prison wards, they don't understand what you are talking about. So I had one group, there were, I think, 3 or 4 Muslims. And it was just working with emotions, dealing with thoughts, and so on. So, and then what I understand is basically, you learn so much, you cannot relate to those people if you look down on them, if you think you are something better. I think under other circumstances, I could have been also a bad criminal as them, but luckily I was not. So who has full control about everything? Nobody has full control. So usually if you really look inside yourself, you can see you have dark sides and you have good sides. So usually sometimes I provoke people and say, in everybody of us is a Adolf Hitler. But if you don't recognize your dark sides, you cannot deal with the dark sides of others. And this is part of the Buddhist path, to face your dark sides, to see them, not to identify with them, not feel overwhelmed by it, stand with it, see it, accept it, but then on the basis of acceptance means here not get angry with it or get upset with it. Be peaceful, okay. But then when you see it's not good for you, not good for others, not good for society, then you take responsibility and you change it. And this is exactly also what I say to the prisoners. I say to the prisoners, when I come to a new group, I say to them, for me, you are not criminals. You are human beings like myself, and there is not a big difference between you and me. But you are human beings who did criminal deeds and were caught and put into prison. And I didn't do these criminal deeds, nor were I caught. So that's why I'm not in your position. But on the human level, we are the same. The emotions which led you to the criminal deeds, like what I just said, I have myself. And actually for me, you are not perpetrators. You are victims. You are victims of your emotions, of your negative emotions. You are the victims of your hate, of your attachment, of your desires, or your envy. Whatever led you to do a criminal deed, the basis is a so-called negative emotion, or a klesha, we call it in Sanskrit, or it's ignorance, just taking a wrong route, something, or it's a combination of everything of these things. So, and you are a victim because you didn't understand this emotion and what it does with you and where it leads you. Actually, the emotion was the boss over you, and you were the slave. You know, you had to follow what your emotion said. And this emotion brought you to prison. And actually, you were either too blind or you were too weak to deal with that emotion. And if you are blind or if you are too weak, it's not a right way to scold you or to beat you up for this. The right way is to help you to see, to understand, and to get stronger. To get stronger, to learn to be the boss of your emotion and not a slave anymore. So I'm here if you want this support, to learn to be the master of your emotion, to regulate them and not be the victim of your emotion. So I give you tools to learn to deal with your thoughts, with your value system, and to find a way for happiness which is not based on criminal deeds. If you are interested in this, you are here in the right group. Otherwise, you are in the wrong group. So something like this. And actually, interestingly, one Muslim said, after the 3-year course was over, and sometimes you don't know really what people really helps. No? So sometimes they tell you what to help them, and sometimes you get a really amazing feedback. But I was surprised. Someone said, in the whole 3-year course, what was the most important information for me, he said information was that I'm the victim of my emotions. And I didn't know it was so important for him. And then, of course, it's not being a victim. You take responsibility to change it, to not be blind and to not be too weak. You must get stronger. And so they get to training. You wanted to ask something?
I exactly wanted to ask that, you know, identifying yourself as a victim and then taking responsibility for their actions look quite far apart. So how do you get people to put them in the position of victim? How did you get people to actually see themselves as responsible for the consequences of their actions and not blame others? as
Okay.
we tend to do when we see ourselves as victims?
To answer this question, I take a detour. I tell something from myself to explain it. So I don't answer it directly. I take a small detour to make this point clearly. You know, I think I said, everything starts from understanding yourself. Or maybe I should say this more clearly. You cannot help prisoners and you cannot understand prisoners if you don't understand yourself and if you are incapable to help yourself. So everything starts from understanding your own mind, your own modes of behavior, your own growing up and modes of behavior and so on. So for instance, what I learned with Buddhism is to understand myself and to forgive myself and to take responsibility. Give an example. When I was a boy sitting in the school, I can still remember very clearly, maybe I was 10 or 11, and I was just bored, and then I caught flies. I just caught them, and then I had a magnifying glass. And then I put those flies under the magnifying glass and burned them alive. I even remember the smell, how it smelled. And for me, it was not, when I became a Buddhist, I was thinking, oh, how horrible. This is totally insane. What did you do to those beings? All this pain, I mean, burning beings alive? This is just horrible. So then I was on the way to condemn myself, to be hard on myself, to, to be hard on myself. And I was thinking, stop. First of all, I tried to understand, why did I do this? What drove my mind? And I was thinking, did I do this to cause those beings pain? For instance, if this is the case, then you could ask, why did I want to cause them pain? Because maybe some other people caused pain to you. And so this is a substitute. But in my case, it was not that I wanted to cause them pain. It was more, I didn't see them as sentient beings with feelings. It was more like a technical thing. I was just interested, when I do this, this happens. If I don't do this, this happens. So for instance, I did a lot of mechanical things, like you're crushing on a fire extinguisher and just looking what happens if all this thing comes out of the fire extinguisher. I was more this type, it was a type of, approaching reality, but it was, so I found out actually it was not so much ill will, it was ignorance, it was not hate. I didn't see these flies as beings who have feelings. And I didn't understand at that time how much pain and terror I caused to them. And then the next thought I was thinking, if anybody had seen what I did and had told me and scolded me, how can you do this? Do you know what pain do you create to such a, so there was nobody who saw it, who taught me. So and then I understood, oh, I'm a victim of my ignorance. And also there was a condition in the society, in the outer environment that nobody saw it. I don't blame them. I don't blame myself. But there were conditions in myself and outer, nobody saw it, nobody took responsibility. So I was not made aware. And because there were these two factors, and not responding society and my inner ignorance, only because of these two main conditions, this could happen. So then I was thinking, so what can I do? Now, 20 years later, I see it was my ignorance which caused this error. Now I can take responsibility. I see this was not right. So then I developed regret. I deeply regretted it. I did some prayers for the flies. And I was thinking, and does it help the fly now, the flies, to get caught in self-blame, to be hard on myself? And I was thinking, no, it doesn't help. So I regretted it. I made prayers for the flies. I developed compassion for the flies. I asked them for forgiveness. And then I forgave myself. I said to me as a little boy, I'm so sorry. you know, you couldn't do it better because you didn't see it. Nobody helped you to see it. So you were a victim of this blindness. Why should I be hard on you and beat you? I'm sorry for you that you couldn't see. But now you see. And now you never ever do this again. Because I went through this process myself. And it's really true what I say. And it's really, as I said, I don't have any guilt, not the slightest, but I have regret. And so this is then the way how I communicate with the prisoners. I use such examples. And then I say, so now, yes, you are a victim. And the victim is because you are blind. This is the ignorance, you call it ignorance, and you are too weak. But now when you see it, you must take responsibility. And then I say, no, you don't have to take responsibility. Sometimes I also go in the other direction. Just let it be. Let the emotion win, be the victim, and be weak. So what will be the result? When we will see us again here in the prison, how many free days you will have outside of the prison? So, I mean, this is Buddhism. No? You always think about the benefit and the demerits of something. So sometimes I interrupt myself and go in the totally other direction. No, forget about it. You don't have to do this. Maybe better you don't do this because then you are free. Your emotions can run whatever they want to do. I said, no, you are not free because you will end up here. And if you don't want to end up here, maybe better you follow and take responsibility. So interestingly, there are only a few people who left the course. Most of the people stayed until the end. Does this make sense, what I say to you? Does this make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, definitely. So I want to ask you to shift the focus to other people who are observing the actions of a criminal and help us to see, why should we have compassion for people who've caused so much suffering to others? And there are people outside prisons too, who are engaging in organized crime, who are engaging in forms of violence that cause terrible suffering to others. Why should we have compassion for them?
Okay. Maybe to answer these questions, I take this time also a detour, but a briefer detour than previously. The briefer detour is we must do everything to stop criminal actions. Because the criminal action is not good for the criminal. It's not good for those who become the object of the criminal action, the victims, so-called victims or survivors. And it's also not good for the society. Criminal actions must be faced, must be addressed, and must have consequences. And also punishments is included in consequences to just stop them. But this does not exclude compassion, and this does not need to be based on hate or revenge. Actually, hate and revenge is not a good idea to deal with prisoners. So now the question is, this was the detour. Why compassion? Actually, the answer comes from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I got this answer from him. I mean, the clarity I got from him. He said, there are two things we must distinguish when we observe another being who acts harmful. By the way, harmful, everybody of us acts harmful, not necessarily being a criminal. So this is also applies to us. And this, the two way of seeing is the action is bad and must be stopped. But the person who does the action is driven by blindness, delusions, afflictive emotions, and doesn't have control over it. And by performing the action, the person harms him or herself, harms others and the society. So out of compassion for the blindness and the weakness of the perpetrator who doesn't see, he or she destroys his future happiness. Based on this compassion, I want to help this criminal to stop this behavior because it's harmful for him, it's harmful for others, harmful for society. Now, and if I have this compassion, then I can have a human relationship to this criminal. I can talk on eye level with the criminal, not from down to them. Because if I speak down to them, you know, I'm high, you're down, nobody will accept any talk like this. This doesn't work. So and then the compassion is also the quality which opens up the prisoner and opens up to be seen. And many of the criminals, they were abused, beaten, treated so badly, neglected so much themselves. I mean, being beaten, neglected, abused in your childhood is no excuse for doing criminal deeds, but they have a story, and the story is usually a long story of pain, and you don't get to listen it if you don't have the compassion. And if you have the compassion, maybe you are one of the few people who ever showed them compassion, and then they are seen and feel they are seen as a human being, and then they open up as a human being, and then change can happen based on a human loving relationship. And if you don't have this compassion, they won't open up, they won't change. There's no guarantee they change, but it's more likely. And of course, there are some criminals, their patterns are so deeply, or their delusions, or even their mental sickness are so deeply, they cannot change maybe in this life. This has also to be accepted. But I mean, basically, I'm looking for those where there is a potential, where people are ready to change.
One of the issues that you mentioned yesterday was talking about the relationship between not being able to see anything positive in themselves.
Oh, yes. We have a society, I think this is general for at least non-Asian societies, I don't know. I mean European society and maybe American society seems to be, let's speak about European societies, a very special German, especially Germany. There is a tendency to only see faults in the other. I mean, especially Germany, maybe it's not so much in Spain. So there is a culture of seeing only the weaknesses and faults in the child. You know, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. You must improve this. And basically the statement, what the child learns is, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. I'm a total failure. And then if you don't get love, and if you don't get compassion as a child, you grow up with this, I'm bad. And this becomes your identity. And then you go to prison because of criminal deeds, criminal pattern, whatever. And then it continues the identification. You are a criminal. Your identity is, you know, made more solid. And not only this, everybody there, including many of the psychologists, what I learned from them, treat you from up, down, no, looking down on you, humiliate you, treat you badly, and what do we say, make your identity as a criminal more solid. So this is the reason why I start every first meeting with, you are not criminals for me. You are human beings for me. So I want in them a shift of the identity. No, I'm a human being who failed. I'm not a criminal. If I continue to support this identity, then there is no basis for change. So, and then based on these conditions, these are society conditions, conditions in the prison, they rarely can see anything good in themselves, because nobody usually in their life ever saw good things in them. So, and then it's my duty to acknowledge their qualities. Of course, I must myself first know what qualities there are, like qualities of gratefulness, kindness, respect, qualities of honesty. So whenever I see a quality, I say, oh, thank you very much for your respect. Or I saw you restrained to say something to give another person space. Thank you very much for this. So by acknowledging the qualities, by saying it, then I want to help them to see they have qualities. But this is a long way. So at one point I understood they have a big problem too with self-hate. They cannot love themselves. So then I asked a Theravada monk, can you please go to prison and teach them metta? He did. And they loved him. Because, you know, Theravada metta starts with love with yourself, which we totally miss in the Tibetan tradition. I mean, it's there only rudimentally in a form of a basic idea, but it's not really there as we Westerners need it. And so, and because I was thinking I'm not an expert in, you know, in these methods, I asked a Theravada monk to teach it, and they really, really loved them. And to give you an extreme example, and to close this, I had one of the prisoners who could stay, I mean, he could not see anything good quality in him, but I started and just listen. And while they tell me stories, I try to see when they are talking, what qualities might there. And then when I find a quality, I say it. Oh, by the way, I found a quality. So, and then I also discuss with them, is this a quality? Why it's a quality? Why not? Blah, 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 blah. And also if it fits the situation. So to cut the story down, this person raped the daughter of his best friend when he was under drugs. This was a horrible nightmare. Everything was a nightmare for his best friend, for the daughter, but also for himself. And so he could not in no way accept himself and forgive himself and so on. So, and then at one time he told me the deed and how it unfolded. And then I just listened. I never ask people to tell me. I just listen when they tell me. And then he said, then at one point he saw the fear in the eyes of the woman. And then I asked him, and then he said, then I stopped. And I asked him, so you stopped when you saw the fear in the eyes of the woman? He said, yes. I said, at least this. And then this is your quality. This is your compassion. Before that, your compassion was totally blocked. You was in this sexual desire tunnel mode, and you were in a totally egoistic tunnel. But then you saw the fear, and then your compassion could rise, and you can rely on this quality. You have this quality, and you can strengthen it. But he couldn't take it, I have to say. And I had another man, an Indian man. His wife didn't want to have sex with him. And under alcohol, he raped his 3-year-old daughter. And he was a Brahmin. He could not forgive him. And not being able to forgive themselves doesn't help them to take really responsibility to learn from it and to heal and to not do it again. So it's part of the healing process to help them to see their qualities. Because if they want to change, they need a basis for change. And the basis is their own qualities. So this can be very difficult. And sadly, neither environment, nor as an environment in prison, nor our society or people who meet prisoners, they look for the qualities in them. So in a way, we contribute that the negative image continues, permeates, or what to say, continues, and then harms them, the future victims and others. So that's why I think it's good to see qualities in them, but being very strict in rejecting the harmful action.
Could you talk a little bit about the distinction between the action and the person? How you make that distinction and how it helps to generate compassion without condoning, without accepting harm?
To give an example, I had one bank robber. He was 22 years in prison. And he was a bit proud of it, that he was called by the press the gentleman bank robber, because he calmed down the victim in the bank when he did the bank robbery. But then I learned he held a pistol on the head of a woman. And then when he started to tell me what gentleman bank robber he was, I said, stop. Do you know what it makes with a person to hold a weapon on their head? I read articles about it. It can mess your life totally. Don't tell me you are a gentleman and don't play down this deed for this woman. Because I have a human relationship, I'm friends of them, you know what I mean? They take it when I say like this. So I address this directly if they try to whitewash their actions, but without causing guilt. I say, you know, this is your ignorance and your self-cherishing or trying to escape responsibility to whitewash this thing. And this is not right. You should understand how harmful this action was for another person, because otherwise you might be compelled to do it again. So in the way I talk to him is very clear to the action and very clear to him. You know, my aim is to help you to not do it again, but then you must see the harm you are causing. But how I talk to him is more like a mother would talk to a child. You know what I mean? Although I don't treat them like childs, I mean, I treat them like adults. But interesting, by the way, very interesting thing. I had one who killed in a sadomaso thing, the other person, and then totally cut the body into pieces. He lost control. He got totally angry. And when I spoke with this person, he's maybe it's like 42. I had always the feeling I speak with a 14-year-old minor. I mean, this man is really big and huge. And usually when I see him, I always hug him. I never do this usually, because for me, I just see a 14-year-old boy in him. And of course, he had a difficult childhood. So I see the action as wrong. I address it as wrong. I change perspective, but I help them on the compassionate level to see this was not good for the others, also not good for me. And if I do it again and so on, I have this whole cycle with continues to mess my life. You know, the Dalai Lama says you must distinguish between the person and the action. With respect to the action, you condemn the action, you stop the action, you do everything to stop the action, but with respect to the person, you have compassion. So now what I mean with this, I see the criminal or the perpetrator as a weak and blind person who is the victim of the emotion. The emotion takes control. I mean, the emotion can be the ignorance combined with hate, with sexual desire and all those things. And this person thinks, you know, following this route, I will be happy in the future. I will have now satisfaction, blah, 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 some sort of happiness in my life. This is a type of a short-term happiness he sees, is totally compelled to do it and brings the other person and himself later in a total disaster. So, and why is he doing this? Because he is a short-sighted, he is blind, and he is weak. And I don't beat a blind, and I don't beat a weak person. A blind person I want to help to see better if this is possible, or I build bridges that he can deal with the blind, or he can deal with the blindness. And with a weak person, I want to make the person stronger. So, and this is the compassionate side. I see the perpetrator as the victim of the emotion, a weak and blind person who can be helped to be stronger and to see and take responsibility. While at the same time, I wish that the perpetrator gets control, that this action never happen again. And this way, I help all future victims, and I help the society, and I help the perpetrator, and I help his family, and I help his girlfriend or friend or whoever, if this person gets control. Was this clear? Does this make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. So what would you say to people who find the idea of having compassion for wrongdoers interesting, but far out of their capacity?
First of all, then I would say accept it. The first, everything accepted. If I cannot have compassion for a wrongdoer, for a perpetrator, for an abuser also, you know, just accept that's beyond your momentary capacity or your way of thinking. It's hard, it's difficult, I cannot do that. It doesn't make, it doesn't help you to beat you up for this, better to accept it. So, and then from this, if you have acceptance, there's already a little bit more space in mind. And then you can think about, do I want to change it? Or do I want to leave it with it? It's your own personal decision. And then if you want to change it, there are ways to change it. If you don't want to change it, then it's also okay, I think. You know what I mean? I'm not a person who says you must have this type of compassion. I think it's important to accept that it's hard. But interesting, you said yesterday, it's easier for people to have compassion for the perpetrator if it is a relative, someone whom you are dependent financially or emotionally on. And it's harder to have it if you don't have a relationship with this person and you don't depend financially or emotionally on the person. This gives you also a perspective. It is possible if the perpetrator is more close to you. Not necessarily, but sometimes. And then everything starts from the acceptance and the space which comes from this. I mean, acceptance, what I mean with acceptance is there is this unjust, brutal, harmful deed and all the pain it causes. And it's important as part of the acceptance, the process of acceptance, which we call patience in Buddhism, or Sopa in Tibetan, is to acknowledge reality. There is pain, there is suffering. But then patience means, if I now get angry on the pain of the suffering, if I get upset, develop mental turmoil on this pain, on the suffering, the Buddha says we shoot a second arrow. The pain and the suffering is the first arrow. We shoot a second arrow, and the wound is even deeper because this anger and being upset and all this mental turmoil increases the pain. It adds additional pain to the pain. It fuels the pain. So then when I see this, I can say, okay, there's the pain, there's the suffering, and I work on it to not be upset with it, to not be angry with it, but to stay with it peacefully. It is as it is. You stand a step back, you don't identify with it, you look at it, it's not nice, it's horrible. You don't identify it, you make a circle around the suffering, you look at it, this is pain, it's harmful. It is as it is. Let me accept it. I don't allow myself to be carried away, to get upset. It makes everything worse. It's okay. And now from within this space, I can think, what do I want to do with the whole situation? But first, you have to create this mental space. Otherwise, there is no freedom to deal heavily with the situation. So everything comes from within this space of peaceful acceptance. And this is then the second thing I said. From within this state of peaceful acceptance, then you can think also, I don't want to make anything about it. If this is okay for it's okay. If you want to do something about, do it. But then think, do something which is useful for every side, useful for you, useful for the other, for the perpetrator, useful for society. And this can include, or must include even, to announce the person to the police, because this person needs a boundary. And this is very interesting. If I think like this action of the perpetrator is harmful. Harmful for the perpetrator because of the consequences, karmic consequences, legal consequences. It's harmful for me. It's harmful for society, harmful. It's not good to allow this question going unnoticed. It should have a consequence. Out of compassion, to help this perpetrator to take responsibility, to not do it again, I go to police. I set boundaries, or I address it. And this is the interesting thing. This is all, or can be all, based on compassion and wisdom. Because wisdom means you look for the long-term result of actions. And it's not good to contribute to a criminal habit of a person, because the person will continue to harm others. If not you, then others. So it's your responsibility even to address it. out of compassion for future victims, for society. And as I said, there is no revenge needed, no hate. Compassion and wisdom are just good enough. Does this make sense?
Mhm. Yes. Then what about, many spiritual practitioners who have experienced abuse or other serious forms of harm often imagine or assume that their job is to forgive.
Oh,
Can you talk about the process of forgiveness by the victim of the wrongdoer, when it should come in the healing process, how it might interfere with the healing process, how victims can manage their view or their feelings towards the wrongdoer?
oh, thank you so much for this question. This is so important. I'm very happy that you asked this question, because so many things are done wrong here, according to my observation and speaking with survivors of abuse. By the way, maybe I should mention, since many years, I deal with perpetrators, prisoners, I deal with victims, and I'm part of institutions. So I have the perspective of institutional side where abuse happens, perpetrator side, and victim side. So I think there is some holistic basic understanding. So now, with respect to the victims, the very, very first thing for someone who was harmed, the person himself and another person, is to acknowledge and see the harm, the pain, and also the emotion it triggers. Just seeing, being aware how it feels, what it makes with you, and accept it. It's horrible, it's painful, I'm so angry, or I'm speechless, I'm frozen, I don't know whatever there is, it just accept it. And the next thing is, what do you need now? What do I need now? And another person could ask exactly, what do you need? This is a good question, by the way, the best question. If there is a survivor of abuse, the best question is, what do you need? What can I do for you? Just addressing the actual situation. This includes already acceptance. You don't speak about forgiveness. You must acknowledge and see the reality. And the reality has different perspectives. The reality of the harm, the pain you feel, and the emotion or lack of emotions. And to say it is like this. This is just what I said about this peaceful acceptance. Now, problem is with many survivors of abuse in Western context, I cannot speak about Tibetan context, in Western context is survivors of abuse tend towards blaming themselves. It was my fault that he did this. So there is this vicious cycle of self-blaming. If you come in, you must forgive the perpetrator, have compassion for the perpetrator. This is poison for the survivor at that point, because it increases the self-blaming cycle and it prevents the healing process. So that's why it's totally misguided to talk in initial states about forgiveness to the perpetrator. What is important? To acknowledge the harm, to acknowledge the emotions, and then to have compassion for yourself. It's so painful. I don't deserve to have gone through this. I'm so sorry for myself. And everybody meeting this person should feel the pain. Give a hug, be just silent. Do whatever is right in the situation to acknowledge the pain. And this is the expression of compassion. Now, here come the problems. When I said this, exactly what I just said to you, to one of my teachers, he said to me, no, you should not do like this. This person should let go. And I said, Rinpoche, you might be able to let go very quickly, which is true, by the way, in certain situations. I have observed it myself. But letting go for a survivor is usually a long-term process, and we are just at the start. You cannot just say, let go. So that's the end of the process, letting go. And maybe for some Rinpoche, it goes quicker. So I really totally disagreed with him. So, and this is so important to understand these processes. And I met one survivor of abuse, abused by her father, a woman. After 6 years of therapy, she was just on the way to stop blaming herself. So then I don't talk about forgiveness. This doesn't help at all. But I talk about, acknowledge the reality, say how sorry I am, ask what I can do, offer certain ways, sometimes also connecting with therapists and so on, and whatever their needs is and whatever they express. And then also, I mean, then if they have therapy, and they don't necessarily need therapy, the therapist knows, of course, what to do. So in one of the processes to learn not to blame yourself. And then actually the therapist, they say, it's a good sign if the survivor gets angry on the perpetrator. And I was thinking, why it's a good sign? It's a good sign because at that moment, the survivor understands, no, it was not my fault. It was the fault of the perpetrator. So this misconception has been got rid of, let go, you could say. She let go this conception, I was wrong, no, he was wrong. And then, of course, then it's not just the next step in the long-term healing process. And for some, it takes years, for some, it's shorter, and some people might not have certain steps. So it's a complex thing.
You've worked with criminals or wrongdoers. You've worked with the survivors or those who've been harmed by their actions. Who do you stand with?
I always stand with the survivor because the perpetrator has a far powerful network. And this network will do everything to denigrate, silence, and continue to harm the survivor. And then if you are in a position that you have some, I mean, I'm a monk. I use then my own power to give it to survivors. And actually, this is also what they need. They need people who stand up with them. For me, it was the right thing to do because they have usually nobody who stands with them. And I'm here to stand with them. But interesting, I also stand with the perpetrator. You know what I mean with this? I see him as a human being. But in public context, I totally stress standing with the survivor.
It has just been extraordinary for me to have the opportunity to hear how you've been working all these years and to feel the authenticity of your practice. And I hope we can speak again here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Damcha. Thank you for the opportunity to share it. Thank you so much.